Welcome back to the Midwest E-Commerce Seminar 2020. We have great things in store for you for the second week of our series. Last Thursday, we kicked things off with 3 excellent presentations about planning your technology strategy, choosing the right platform for your e-commerce store, and accelerating your business through and beyond COVID-19. If you missed it, you can catch the session recordings and download some supplemental resources at midwestecommerceseminar.com. There's some really great stuff up there, so I encourage you to check them out and share those resources with your teams. Today we are going to go deeper into the technology stack, stepping behind the scenes and pulling back the curtains. That's right, we're talking about your back office. Brightpearl, TaxJar, ShipperHQ, and Square are here to discuss how to get your back office tax rates, inventory, shipping, and payment solutions in order to create a better e-commerce management and customer experience. After the presentation, we'll do a quick wrap-up toast with our presenters' signature cocktails and then hang around for some live Q&A. If you have any questions but aren't able to stick around, be sure to send them into our webinar chat or ask our experts at midwestecommerceseminar.com. First up today, we have Sarah Arthrell with Brightpearl, here to talk about digital operation platforms.
Hi everyone, this is Sarah Souza from Brightpearl. Thank you all so much for joining us today. We're super excited to talk about how to optimize your back office processes for business agility. We've got a lot of great stuff to cover with you all today. We'll get started with a little bit about ourselves and Brightpearl, then we'll dive right into the changes in consumer behavior and how we're seeing retailers adapt, the importance of providing a stellar customer experience, and how perfecting your back office operations will be crucial for success. Before we get into it, we want to take a quick minute to introduce ourselves. Like I mentioned, my name is Sarah Souza. I am a partner product marketing manager here at Brightpearl, based out of our Austin, Texas office. I'm also super lucky to be joined by Sarah Arthrell, our global director of product marketing, who also sits in our Austin, Texas office and has a wealth of knowledge to share with you all today. Before I hand things over to other Sarah, I just want to give a quick overview of what we do here at Brightpearl. We're a digital operations platform that is 100% built for retail. When we say operations, we're referring to all the steps that take place in the back office or after a consumer hits the buy button. So everything from order management, inventory management, shipping and fulfillment, and all of the things that happen in between, so that you as a merchant can scale your business, keep your customers satisfied and coming back, especially during times of change as the market gets even more competitive. So what you see on the screen here are characteristics of Brightpearl. This is what we bring to a business to really help support its growth. All right, I'll hand it over to Sarah now.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Sarah. Okay, so now that we have just more of an understanding of what exactly we do at Brightpearl, let's talk some more about what we're here to discuss today. There has been a very steady shift toward e-commerce that's been happening really for the last few years, just as we've seen more and more businesses start to sell online. But COVID has massively accelerated just the growth of e-commerce. And actually, according to an Adobe report that was released back in June, they found that total online spending in May hit $82 billion, which is up 77% from that same period last year. So that growth has just caused a massive shift in consumer behavior. For instance, you've got consumers switching brands at really an unprecedented rate. A McKinsey report found that 36% of consumers are trying a new product brand. And then 80% of that same group intend to actually just continue using that brand, even when COVID subsides. So what's I found particularly interesting about this stat is that shoppers cited really, a bunch of different reasons that they decided to switch brands. But at the top of that list was both availability and then convenience. So if a product wasn't in stock or if it wasn't available where a consumer was shopping, then they were really quick to go somewhere else. First Insight research also found that 21% of consumers say they are actually shopping more frequently online since coronavirus, with millennial shopping habits changing the most out of that group. And that was at 30% of millennials saying that they are, yes, buying more online. And then finally, nearly 30% of consumers are also taking advantage of these more flexible fulfillment options. So you've got things like buy online, pick up in store, or curbside pickup services that they're starting to utilize more and more. So these influences from the pandemic have really caused just a new type of consumer to be created that retailers are now, of course, forced to start adhering to. So with all of these changing consumer behaviors, what have retailers done to successfully adapt to that? Whether you're going online for the first time, or maybe you've seen some really large spikes in your business, or I guess on the flip side, some bigger declines, or even adding maybe some new sales channels. Regardless of any of those scenarios, one thing that is absolutely certain is just the agility and flexibility that's absolutely necessary if a merchant wants to survive right now. And one of the areas that retailers are focusing a lot on is the move to direct to consumer, which really even pre-pandemic had seen tons and tons of growth. But now with so many retail stores actually closing from COVID, it is definitely a path that will, I think, only start to look more and more attractive to some of those companies. And some reports are actually predicting that D2C is going to see a 24% growth in 2020 from last year. But selling direct to consumer, I mean, it changes the way that you buy and sell and forecast. It changes how you run your warehouse or staff your business and how you take payments and use reports and literally everything else in between. So there's definitely got to be some strategy that goes into making this shift successful. And of course, I think it's worth mentioning, one of the biggest things to focus on is in this transition, you have to maintain a frictionless shopping experience. And that's because consumers expect what they ordered when they ordered it. And if you miss the mark on those expectations, it's really going to be tough to recover that. And then in a similar vein as D2C is really merchants exploring just adding new sales channels altogether. Everyone here knows that selling online is an incredibly complicated process, but the most successful brands make their goods available across all sorts of different channels. So in addition to their own sites, they also sell through third-party platforms, maybe like Amazon or eBay. But this also opens up a lot of opportunity to mismanage inventory. So you've got things like out of stocks, or maybe you're overselling a product, which has damaging consequences. So it's really important to think about how to manage those back office areas like your inventory as you consider adding these new channels. Okay, so there's also been a shift in expectations when it comes to having these flexible shopping experiences, especially around fulfillment, like I talked about earlier. Brightpearl actually conducted some research recently, which found a quarter of retailers plan to add either BOPIS or curbside functionality within the next 6 months. And this trend, as you guys all know, had already seen a lot of growth before COVID, but now for a lot of merchants, this has now become just an area of necessity versus sort of something cool and fun that you offered more out of convenience for your customers. Because a lot of these consumers, they don't want to, or they can't actually go into a store to do their shopping. So offering these types of fulfillment alternatives, this is a really great way to obviously give your shoppers what they want, but also a chance for brands to compete with some of the online giants that have been doing this for a while. And we found too that if you provide a consumer with some of these more convenient delivery options, they're actually more likely to choose you even over one of those better known brands. Okay, returns management also has to be an area of focus for retailers, even more so, unfortunately, than normal. As I talked about in that last slide, we know that consumers are buying more online than they ever have before. And that uptick in online shopping, it's opened up a lot more opportunity for returns. And as a way to sort of manage that increase, brands are offering things like a longer return window, or maybe some different options for shipping their items back, even going out and doing free returns. And the purpose of this is to really provide just the best shopping experience, even for a customer that's returning your product, because this is what makes it possible for merchants to still capitalize on that customer lifetime value, even if an item doesn't work out. And then lastly, we need to talk about implementing new technology, which really is related to everything else I just mentioned on this slide. Retailers are adding to their tech stack to help better manage each of these processes. That technology is what lets them do their jobs better and also be way more efficient. And with just so much growth happening in e-commerce currently, especially just like overnight, finding and then really implementing the right tech to support that growth, that's going to be super critical to just a brand's long-term success and their survival through this. Okay, so with a number of different online shoppers and a bunch of new ways of selling for these retailers and just the heightened focus on implementing some of that technology, it is super important to not just keep up with the trends, but also to really nail that customer experience, because at the end of the day, that's really what is going to get them coming back. So we know that the cost to merchants of acquiring new customers is growing. And that comes from adding more and more tools to the tech stack. So you've got things like PPC and agency costs and building your website and automating your email, all sorts of stuff that is just continuing to really affect that tech stack of yours. In fact, customer acquisition has actually doubled in the last 5 years for retailers. And with merchants almost always losing money on the first sale because of those increasing costs, it's really important to think about really the long-term value of the customers that you're acquiring, and in particular, what you can do to make sure that those subsequent sales happen. So this whole idea is actually even more important now as the industry sort of adjusts from the impact of COVID and sees a lot of these businesses going online, some for the first time ever. And it's new and it's unfamiliar, especially if you're just jumping into the D2C world. So there's a lot of businesses who are being forced to figure out this whole customer experience thing and do so really quickly. And what we're seeing at Brightpearl actually is a lot of those businesses are jumping into online selling without really figuring out how they're going to maintain this healthy customer experience. So you've got things happening like orders are getting backed up, or maybe they're running out of inventory because they're struggling to really figure out the whole like multi-channel thing. Or maybe the returns process is super cumbersome or maybe just non-existent altogether. And as a result, these customers are just having really, really bad experiences. Actually, what makes it even worse is that we found that today's online consumers are increasingly vocal and very unforgiving of those mistakes, and don't just sit at home and get upset about it, but they go online and they use these review sites to voice these concerns and really end up in theory sort of telling the whole world about it. And those reviews that are being written and shared with the world, these are now at the forefront of buying decisions. And in our research, we found that 90% of shoppers say, yes, ratings are important to my buying decision. And then 95% say they're actually going to read an online review even before they make a purchase. So in the past, when maybe you had an address pasted onto a shipping label incorrectly, or maybe you had the wrong item that was picked in the warehouse, or the order actually wasn't even fulfilled in time, so it couldn't get out to the carrier to hit those delivery expectations. Those experiences that a consumer goes through, they are no longer acceptable. In fact, almost 90% of shoppers will stop doing business with the brand altogether if they have a bad experience. So those experiences are turning into anger or frustration, which then goes on to an online message that doesn't only impact the likelihood of that consumer buying from you again, but also impacts a lot of other future customers buying from you as well as they read through those online reviews. But Perhaps most surprising through all of our research was learning really why these reviews are happening or where it's occurring. And obviously you're going to experience some issues when you've got a broken product, or maybe what you sold doesn't perform as advertised. Of course, those are going to generate some negative reviews. But when you exclude those sorts of situations, we found that almost 80% of poor reviews are directly related to issues that shoppers have after they click the buy button. So those include things like problems with customer service, or obviously issues with delivery and inventory mistakes or fulfillment delays and bad returns processes, all these things that have to do with the stuff that happens in the back office. So let's take a little bit of a look at why that really is. What I'm going to show you here next is a keyword analysis. So this highlights some of the common themes that we saw in negative reviews. And then the size of the circle really represents the frequency that we saw reviews associated with whatever that specific word was. So you've got things like service and delivery. We see refunds on here. The word late came up a lot. All things that are related to the experience that a shopper has. So let's take missed deliveries for an example. You had someone who paid for next day delivery, or maybe you had next day delivery was just part of your original offer. But either way, the item doesn't turn up on time. Now, obviously that can be attributed to some carrier issues, but it also can happen because the order doesn't get processed quickly enough. And that way it doesn't get to the warehouse team fast enough before the carrier turns up. So maybe that's because of a human error, or it also could be because there were just too many manual steps and something unfortunately got missed. Refunds and returns, like we talked about earlier, these are just becoming more and more prominent as we see more shoppers go online. But we keep seeing merchants who have super manual returns processes in place with just way too many steps of checking the stock back into the warehouse and then crediting the order in whatever the accounting platform is that they're using. And then they have to trigger the fund and the payment gateway. All these cause delays and end up really frustrating the consumer, who is already a little bit frustrated because they're having to return what they bought. We really want to try and nurture them through that process and avoid amplifying to that frustration. You've also got things like mispicks, which is almost always a result of some sort of error that happened in the warehouse. So maybe caused by just a lack of quality check, or maybe you're not using barcode scanning. The process is a little bit more manual. Or sometimes even worse, I think, is you've oversold the item because your channels that you're selling on, they don't talk to each other in real time. And now you're having to tell the customer that the item that they thought they were getting isn't available any longer. And that obviously generates a lot of frustration as well. So all of these negative reviews, these relate back to issues that happen in your back end operations. All right, so now that I've sort of set the stage and shed some light on just hopefully reiterating what the power of these reviews is and how they relate so often back to the back office, let's talk about how to get these operations done right for every sale and really help to generate some of those positive reviews. All right, so first we, of course, need to talk about syncing your inventory across all of your sales channels. Any inventory system has to be able to log and account for orders that come from literally everywhere you sell. So by having these channels actually communicate with your back office, you'll have way more accurate records of stock, which then help you avoid things like what I talked about earlier, the overstocking, the overselling, preparing for maybe huge demand surges that you have during the holidays, or actually on the flip side, being able to liquidate some low performing stock very quickly if you need to, which actually then takes me to my next point around demand and inventory planning. Now, obviously, our jobs would be a lot easier if we could predict the future, probably a lot more fun too. But since we do not have the luxury of that superpower, instead, we've got brands that have to be able to make very educated and very intelligent predictions that are based on real data. And with that data, now you can understand demand and how that demand fluctuates and when that happens, even if you can't see into the future. So that you can ensure that you've got the right stock on hand, but also optimize cash flow so that you're spending money on the products that you know are actually going to sell. Now, you've also got automated order processing to think about, right? Obviously, processing orders is critical to everything that you're doing in the back office. And the faster and more efficiently that you process those orders, then the faster and more efficiently your customers get their goods, the happier they are, and the more likely that they'll come back and buy from you again. But you want your team to also work smarter during this process and not having to work harder. So you're going to need some technology that automates those orders that are coming in and will follow the normal fulfillment process for all of your ordinary orders, but then sort of separates out any of the abnormal orders that actually need a little bit more of your attention so that you can investigate further before they're fulfilled. That really right there, that's the dream scenario. And more importantly, you want all of this to get done without having to hire a bunch more people, especially as your business tries to handle any of those peak trading periods. So the best type of order management software, these are going to be the ones that let you achieve this level of automation across all these different channels, but then also make it really easy to create those workflows without you having to go out and hire somebody to come in and write all these complicated scripts. And then finally, I, of course, need to talk about the necessary evil of managing returns. Even really with like the best and most slickest logistics out there, e-commerce stores are still going to deal with returns. And how you manage this process is the last part of your back-end operations, but also, in my opinion, one of the most important, because when a consumer is returning a product, in most instances, they're already a little bit irritated, right? They're probably a little bummed that the product that they were excited about wasn't the right choice for whatever reason. And now they're feeling some of that disappointment, which makes your job as the merchant even harder because you're having to dig yourselves out of an already deep hole and end that last point of interaction on the right note so that they'll come back to purchase from you again. And when you look at the most successful online retailers out there, many of them, they've got one thing in common. And that is that they do not make issues with any sort of return. If a customer, if they're not satisfied, then they're able to negotiate whatever the exchange and refund may be, and they're able to do so really easily. So obviously, within reason and as much as possible for your business and your profits, you want to try and emulate this kind of hassle-free return policy, which, as sort of the theme of this whole talk track this is even more important right now because of COVID. You know, retailers are going to be preparing for this sort of return tsunami because there's going to be so many people returning some of the stuff they bought online during the pandemic and store closure. So the experience that a brand provides on returns right now will be really key to just its long-term survival in the world of e-commerce. And it's not just the policy, by the way, I want to make sure to note that, but also how well you process the return. How quickly is that happening? How easy are you making it for your customer, for your team? Those are the things that's really going to set retailers apart from each other. All right, so I know I went through a lot today and it feels like there was a lot to remember. So I just wanted to summarize with the most important points that when you walk away from today, this is going to be the stuff that you remember. Obviously, first at this, we need to be aware of the trends and think about how easily and how quickly your business can adapt to meet those new trends. Come up with contingency plans if something in your process needs to change, whether that's brought on from something like a pandemic, like we've seen right now, or just is part of a shift in your strategy. It's really critical to think about how your business will adapt proactively versus having to sort of run around trying to react to some of that behavior. And then secondly, do not wait. Once you have identified what needs to change, put that change into action. You don't want to be behind here and be caught sort of in this game of playing catch up. The more time that's spent delaying means more opportunity for mistakes, and also you're just a little bit later to the game. So really pay attention to just sort of making that jump as well after you think that through. And then finally, really the most important part is think about what sort of technology is out there to help you address those trends that you're seeing and the way that you adapt to them. So really lean on your tech partners for guidance and recommendations on how to implement this type of change across your business, especially when you are considering the addition of a bigger platform into your tech stack. So something like Brightpearl, for instance. Our in-house implementation and our professional teams, they are here really to offer advice and also at the same time be super transparent about what to expect. In fact, we scope out your entire project before you sign, so you know exactly how to prepare and exactly where to take your business next and really keep up with those trends and use the tech to support that. And as the only digital ops platform that's built for retail, we also are streamlining and automating and really adding tons of efficiency to those manual and time-consuming and also very error-prone tasks that nearly 80% of negative reviews are actually related to. So think about what other tech is out there that can help you in not just getting positive reviews, but also mitigating the bad ones. What other tech out there focuses on streamlining your orders and your inventory and your fulfillment? And then lastly, what tech can automate as much of these time-consuming processes as possible so that your business can really thrive in this growth instead of failing? I've been really passionate about these topics for a long time, not just as from my experience working at Brightpearl, but also like as a consumer, because I've been on the bad end of a bad experience. And I know it's frustrating to know that these companies can fix this and eliminate my frustration. At the end of the day, make it easier for me to buy from them. And really this whole idea, as I've said a couple times today, this is all especially important right now, just given everything going on with the coronavirus. So I actually just finished reading an article recently that cited 11% of all retail shopping was done online as of April 2020. And that by the time COVID has been resolved, buying habits will have changed so much that they're estimating that number to be closer to 30%. So as I touched on a little bit earlier, that customer satisfaction, that retention, those are going to be paramount as we see a huge rush of more and more brands start to go online. And competition is going to be fierce as you see new players come up and really focus on dethroning the leaders and just grabbing their piece of the market. And if I were them, I would be doing this by perfecting that customer experience. And that's where Brightpearl is here to help. We're here to help nail that process, all of those steps involved in the post-purchase so that you can see the increase in customer lifetime value through things like added loyalty. Obviously, you've got your higher average order volume and of course, just more frequent purchases. And that's it for me.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you so much, Sarah, and everyone for your time today. If you have any further questions about Brightpearl or anything we chatted about, please feel free to reach out to either myself or Sarah. Now I'll hand it over to Brad to introduce the next presentation with TaxJar.
That was Sarah from Brightpearl with some great information about digital operations platforms and improving your back office management in e-commerce. If you have any questions for Sarah or about e-commerce back office in general, please send them through the webinar chat or email them to qa@midwestecommerceseminar.com or use the hashtag MES2020. Next on the agenda today, we have Zach from TaxJar. He is here to talk about the part of the e-commerce that a lot of people would rather not deal with, and that is sales tax. It's messy, it's complicated, it's always changing, and it's the perfect example of kind of problem technology can solve. Let's hear more from Zach. Take it away.
Thanks, Brad. Great to be here with you all. And I'd like to thank Brightpearl for a great start to this session. My name is Zach Mesmer. I'm with TaxJar and have been here about 2 years and have about 6 years of sales tax industry knowledge. Really excited to get this started and walk you guys through the complexities of sales tax and how TaxJar can help you solve this by automating your sales tax compliance with technology. So when you sell on multiple sales channels, sales tax can get very complicated very quickly. Selling on different platforms, increasing volume and revenue, and growing multi-state filing requirements can create a huge hassle for any business. But as the landscape has changed over the past couple of years, small to mid-sized businesses, it can be a really, really big challenge in one, understanding it, but also finding the right partner or solution out there to help automate this complex, tedious, and time-consuming process. So let's just walk through a few aspects of the current condition and the problem as we see it today. One huge problem is uncertainty, really, as to where your business has or where they have the requirement to collect sales tax. Another, charging the right amount of tax or not calculating the right amount of tax appropriately. Another issue can be aggregating the sales data across multiple sales channels, making sure it's in a consumable format to be able to be filed with the state's departments of revenue. And then not having enough time to keep up with the various changes that occur to journal boundaries, tax rate changes tied to products or services, and really when deadlines change for things like filing and remitting the sales tax to the state. So why is this such a challenge for the small to mid-sized business? Nexus laws are evolving. Over the past few years, there have been some pretty big legislative changes that have really increased the exposure for a lot of small to mid-sized businesses, but especially for e-commerce and remote sellers. Sales tax channels have different calculation options. Not every platform has an accurate solution. In fact, most can't simply provide an accurate solution out of the box, which is why companies like TaxJar exist to assist with this. And then some solutions actually don't have any granularity when it comes to sales tax at all, which can be very limiting into collecting the right amount of tax on the front end from the customer. And then the manual process of combining all the data from the different channels can be risks of inaccuracy, not coming it the right way and in the right format can do inaccurate reporting and filing. And then not understanding how the products or services that you sell need to be treated state to state. Basically, every state has their own ability to charge and not charge tax on certain products and services. So as your exposure requirement in the different states, the problem begins to balloon and become much, much more difficult, to a point impossible to be able to manage it without putting a technology solution in place. So understanding when you need to comply with a certain state sales tax law is the first and foremost most important part of understanding your growing sales tax compliance requirements. There's a term called nexus, and nexus means a significant enough presence in a state to where you are then obligated to comply with that state's sales tax laws. And by comply, I mean get registered for a sales tax permit and collect tax from buyers in that state where applicable. Every state's nexus laws are slightly different. Your business has physical nexus in a state if they have things like a warehouse, offices, or employees. Things like inventory as well. If it's your inventory and it's warehoused and you're using a different distributor to fulfill those orders, that can create nexus. So you can also have economic nexus in a state, which refers to a certain amount of revenue and number of transactions you've done into that state within a certain time frame. And every state has the ability to set a different threshold and different look-back period to this economic nexus law. So it's the South Dakota v. Wayfair ruling that created this new ability for states to then create their own nexus laws tied to remote sales. So it was made constitutional about 2.5 years ago. And over the past 2.5 years, about 43 states have adopted this law. It's essentially a way for them to easily recoup and enforce sales tax collection for remote sellers, where prior to this law, if they didn't have a physical presence, if they didn't have any of those warehouses, employees, or offices, they now have the ability to enforce sales tax collection and compliance for remote sellers selling into their state. So one thing that's important to do is a complete exposure analysis on your sales volumes and revenue into certain states, and then looking at each state's look-back period. So TaxJar has blogs. We have resources that actually go through in a very clear format which states have economic nexus laws, what their thresholds are, what their look back periods are, so that you can go through your sales data and quickly check where you might have exposure. We also have tools built within our platform that help automate the tracking as well as the notifications for a business if they ever approach and get close to an economic nexus threshold, or if they ever cross it. So to comply in any state, the first step is to register. So you got to register a sales tax license. After you understand you have nexus there, you'd go and apply for that sales tax permit, get your tax ID and filing frequency from the state. So when the state assigns you the filing frequency, they can do it in a number of ways. Most commonly, it's going to be annually, monthly, or quarterly. And this is an example of an annual or an annual filing remittance schedule once every year, quarterly every 3 months, and then monthly remitting once every month. So after you understand when you triggered nexus into a state and you receive your tax ID and the filing frequency from that state, it's important to understand the products and services that you sell and how they're treated. A lot of different industries sell products and services that have varying taxability across different states. So the challenge here is understanding how your products are categorized, how that state treats it from a tax perspective. Is it fully taxable? Is it partially taxable? Or is it a non-taxable item? With the state's ability to change their boundaries, their treatment of certain tax types, it creates another layer of complexity on keeping up to date with how your product or service is treated in that state. So a good example would be two separate industries, food and groceries versus software as a service and digital goods. States traditionally have not taxed, the majority of them have not taxed digital goods, SaaS services. But things like grocery items that have been around for a while, medications, clothing, and textbooks, very common in retail. A lot of states pretty much have their treatment down on how they want businesses to collect or not collect sales tax on those items. So as things like new technology, digital products, software as a service grow, as these industries expand, more and more states are going to determine that they would like to charge tax on this and also set their own determinations at which rate they charge, whether it's partially or fully taxable. So here's an example of two separate verticals that we were just discussing and the differences from a tax landscape on which states charge tax on the items and which states do not charge tax on these items. So very important to understand the vertical you're in and understand how each state that you have exposure in treats the taxability of the services or products you sell. So one step to really solving this problem is leveraging technology to do it. Like we mentioned earlier, it's a tedious, time-consuming process. If it's done manually, it just carries a risk, and there's no benefit to doing it the right way manually. So with TaxJar, we provide accurate instant sales tax calculations through our API and several integrations. We have several pre-built integrations to support whether it's the data import or real-time calculations to ensure that we're aggregating the data under the reporting to save you time on that process, as well as calculating the proper amount of tax to ensure you're compliant with the state. And then if you want to take it one step further, we can also file the tax returns directly with the states on your behalf in the right format and guarantee accuracy with the filings we submit. And then we also have tools, like I mentioned, to help you track things like your growing exposure requirements as they pertain to economic nexus laws. So with our API, we really focus on the lean and modern technology approach to handling this growing challenge for a lot of businesses. With our API, you have access to our full tax category library, where we maintain all the rates, rules, and changes that happen to particular tax codes, depending on the industry that you're selling in. And then we also have the ability to basically make the right calculations based on any jurisdictional boundary changes that might occur. We take the full address information for the shipping of tangible personal products or the billing information for digital download or software as a service subscription to drill down to the rooftop and return back the most accurate sales tax rate. So we do all the research on our end. We make our API updated with any changes that happen to the boundaries, to the tax category changes, so that you can focus on more revenue generating aspects of your business. One example of a multi-channel customer would be plant therapy up here. So our multi-channel reporting came out of the box and brought all of their channels into one place, automatically combining all their sales data without having to use things like Excel spreadsheets or CSV uploads. This also became key to filing accurately in each state. So Plant Therapy, one of our customers, currently files in about 44 states. And when we were working with them, they estimated that using our solution has saved them about 40 hours a month in employee time. So it's quite a bit of time savings with guaranteeing things like FC to help really everybody, business owners, CFOs, accounts, receivable clerks, sleep well at night. Awesome. Thanks everybody for your time today and tuning in here. Feel free to submit any questions that you have to us. We'd be happy to follow up. And yeah, thanks again. Learn more at TaxJar.com or feel free to book a demo at TaxJar.com/demo. Thanks.
Welcome back, everybody. We just heard from Zach with TaxJar. If you're just joining us, we're halfway through day 2 of the Midwest E-Commerce Seminar 2020. We heard from Brightpearl and TaxJar about getting your back office digital operations and sales tax automation in order. Next on the agenda today, we'll be talking about integrating shipping and payment solutions for your e-commerce store. Our next speaker is Quentin from ShipperHQ. Shipping is another very complex piece of the e-commerce solution, and it's only gotten more complicated since COVID-19. Quentin has some best practices to share as we embark on the new era of e-commerce.
Good evening, everyone. This is Quentin from ShipperHQ. Appreciate everyone's time. Hopefully you've got your coffee, maybe a pumpkin spice latte, and you're all settled in, ready to talk with Square and I. So up right now, what we're going to talk about is the best practices for the new era of e-commerce, specifically around shipping. Like I mentioned, I'm Quentin from ShipperHQ. Who is ShipperHQ and why are we here? So we were originally a company called Webshop Apps. We were founded in 2008 by our CEO, Karen Baker. Her husband actually was a merchant who sold on eBay. And way back in the day in 2008, Magento had just come out. It was this new thing. It was a beta. And our CEO, Karen, is a technologist. So she thought, you know what? We're getting ripped off on these marketplaces. Let's build a website. She built this Magento website. And when it got to the shipping piece, she wanted to show a standard and an expedited. What she found was you can only show one shipping rate at a time. She thought that was pretty crazy. Over a weekend, had a beer or two, wrote an extension called Matrix Rate. Matrix Rate has gone on to be one of the most downloaded and popular shipping extensions in Magento history. Once she put that one out in the world, people were like, wow, you solved that problem. Hey, what about this? Karen would kind of sit there with her engineering mind and say, yeah, I can fix that. And she wrote another extension and then another extension. And before she knew it, the great corporate job at Thomson Reuters in London got packed in, and she started the entrepreneurial flame of Webshop Apps. So Webshop Apps, like I mentioned, was started in 2008. What we noticed, though, in 2012, 2013, is we had a lot of customers buying 2, 3, and 4 of our extensions on Magento, and they were having to manage them all separately, and it all became a bit of a mess. So the idea for a SaaS platform, ShipperHQ, was incepted there, created in 2015. We officially launched on BigCommerce in 2015. That's when I started. And we've been rocking and rolling ever since with the partners that you see below, all the way from Shopify Plus to Salesforce Commerce Cloud to you don't see the platform that you're on, contact me and I'll be happy to chat about it. Most of your customers are thinking, what is ShipperHQ and what does it do? So ShipperHQ is the cart and checkout experience of shipping for your customers. So just like you're making your product page, your website, everything pretty, ShipperHQ handles that in the checkout. So why? Why do we do this? Why do we have an app? So if you look throughout here, there's some really interesting stats here that jump out at us all about abandonment. 44% of abandoned carts are because of high shipping costs. It's kind of crazy. That's a solvable one. 61% of abandoned carts are because there's no free shipping offered. Maybe not always is solvable because sometimes you can't offer that free shipping, but there's ways that we can look at how to solve that. Grab your most high margin items that you have the biggest profit on and say, hey, if you order 150 of these particular items, you get free shipping on those, but exclude anything over 5 pounds. Get the granularity and the specificity to control that the way that you want, all the way to the one that is my biggest, it's the bullseye that we should all be aiming for. 60% want to see an estimated delivery date. Nobody shops on Amazon because the site's pretty. People shop on Amazon because they know when the items arrive. You can do that same thing on your Magento, BigCommerce, Shopify, Woo, Zoe, Commerce Cloud. Damn near any site that you want that, you can give that experience to your customers. So what does ShipperHQ do to help solve these cart abandonment issues? So you're going to see here a few features. We're going to highlight a couple of them in particular and talk about some COVID cases where ShipperHQ really stepped in and helped out. The two features that we're going to go into in more depth is going to be our in-store pickup or our click and collect for any Brits that are along on the ride with us, and our delivery date showing our calendar of when items can arrive. So those are going to be covered off separately. Talking about a couple things that really help out a lot here are going to be the shipping rules, and this is the engine of ShipperHQ. This is my personal favorite part of the system because if you know how to make a shipping rule, you can kind of do anything. So this gives you the customers the ability to give that targeted free shipping that I highlighted before. If we have our high margin items and we say, if X item is in the cart and the cart is over $150, give ground free shipping. That's where a carrier rule would be. Or on the flip side of that, that would be if, weird stuff, hair care products are flammable and they can't ship via ground sometimes. If hair care items in the cart, then hide air methods only show ground. That's the other side of those things. All the way to dimensional packing. Gone are the days of saying, hey, this item weighs 3 pounds. What's it going to cost me to go from A to B and just getting charged off that? The dimensional divisors is the really big thing here. So that's whenever you have to take into account the weight and the dimensions. It's like going to the FedEx or UPS counter and talking to that really nice older gentleman or lady and saying, hey, how much does this cost to get it from Tuscaloosa to Austin, Texas, where we are? I don't know anyone in Tuscaloosa, but how much does it cost to get it from A to B? That level of granularity of those rates is all available in the cart and checkout. You can do that like that. Why not? Why would you not do that? All the way to things like shipping and LTL, big, heavy stuff, pallets, all that good stuff. But what I want to talk about in our next couple slides is our calendar and our store pickup. These are two features that we've seen a lot of uptick in since March, and it's continuing up and up and up. So I want to tell you guys a story about Donald Russell. They are a butcher in Scotland. They actually hold the royal something that certifies them as the official butcher of the Queen in the UK. So this is a customer who usually sells higher end foods, higher end, perishable goods on the website. What they noticed is almost overnight, they had the 400 to 500% increase on their website. Now that caused a lot of belts and braces on a lot of different pieces. They have a fantastic agency and screen pages that helped out with a lot of that. But I'm here to talk about the shipping piece. So what this meant is people were trying to order 400 to 500% more traffic in the inverse of that into the actual orders. There's a lot more orders coming through the system and there's a lot more product. And we're talking about butchers. We're talking about something that takes process and time to get the products ready to ship. So for them, they had to make sure they tried to meet demand. So within ShipperHQ, what we gave them the ability to do is say, hey, there's a certain number of lead days that are now associated with these meats. These are longer than they usually are. So the customer would go in there and say, hey, this is a 10-day lead time now. I can't just pull this off the shelf and mail it because we have 400% more people on the website. That's 400% more people that are potentially trying to purchase. So their whole goal is to focus on the experience of the customer. They're a very customer-centric organization. So by us giving them the ability to get granular and say, this can't ship for 10 days. If you still want it, it's going to arrive on the 18th. Those customers would still buy it. They still want that product, and they're okay with knowing when it comes because they know when it comes. So we're talking about that. I'm getting rid of the image of the chimichurri. Let's see what the calendar looked like. So as you can see here, this is a Magento 2 checkout. You guys are probably familiar. What you guys are seeing right here is our calendar. So that calendar is where the customer, when they add that item, they have the ability then to pick when that day arrives. Now that's not just a calendar. What this customer has, like I mentioned before, is the lead times that take into account for the product, the dispatch dates that are blacked out, the same day cutoff, all of that complicated business logic that maybe this customer or maybe you have, this is a feature that looks cool to you, has All that gets put into ShipperHQ, and we do all that complicated thinking for you. You give us your business endpoints, our algorithm works out the rest. We show the calendar, customer selects the day they want, it hits order, and it saves all that great stuff back into Magento. So this is one example of a customer that really was thriving and took advantage of their situation. Going to kind of another side, so this is Gertrude Hawk Chocolates. This is a company that's based up in PA, it's Pennsylvania, for anyone who doesn't know. They are a B2B, B2C, and they do a lot of holiday catalog ordering. We worked on this site with a fantastic agency called Weidenhammer. They came to us launching their site in January of this year and had ShipperHQ as part of the build. We had some phase 3 and phase 4 things talking about wanting to get click and collect set up. We have a lot of locations. Sometimes customers want to come pick it up. That's a future problem. Well, that got reeled back in. And we had a very quick conversation on a Thursday to get busy on a Friday to have it ready on a Monday. So what we did for them is we said, okay, let's get your locations, whatever ones we were going to do that in. They have more than we put in there, but we said, okay, let's choose our 10 best locations, our 10 ones that are nearest to the customers, and let's have them come collect these items from the store. What they were trying to capture was the Easter traffic. So the Easter traffic where you drive to the store and pick it up, order online, go to the store and pick that up. So I'm really proud of this number, more than a lot of the other stats that we've done, in the last few months. But we helped them recover 66% of the lost business they recovered. And that was all because what we did was we gave more transparency and we gave an option. We gave an option that they were ready for. It was a little bit of a hot wire fix, but it saved 66%, and now it's a mainstay on their website. So we're going to get rid of these delicious looking pretzel rods, and we're going to look at a checkout. So in this particular instance, I have the option to get my food either standard overnight, next day, or if I'm in the Dunmore location, I can go pick it up. And here's a map. Here's a map to where you can see where it is. You can click the View Larger map. It opens up another tab. So this helps customers plan around when their actual items can arrive or when they can go pick it up. It's really up to them at that point. So more COVID opportunities for e-commerce sites. Now, I think a lot of this is going to go beyond COVID. I think these are things that are mainstays in this, not just because I'm a shipping logistics nerd, but I think these are things that are really going to help differentiate you guys for your competitors, as long as they don't watch us. Don't show your competitors this video. So local delivery. This is a really cool one. So where I'm based, I live in Austin, Texas. I live downtown. What I've noticed a lot of the local brick and mortar stores are doing is they're killing local delivery. They've got the 5 zip codes where they know, hey, if you're in these 5 zip codes, I'll come bring it to you. If you're outside those 5 zip codes, maybe there's a fee associated with it, but that's what they're doing right now. So I order from a coffee shop. It's called The Little Coffee Shop. They deliver cold brew to my house the next day. It's amazing. I love it. So local delivery is definitely something to look in, hone in, find the zip codes that either you got a nephew who works for you, an intern, put them on a bike or a van and have them deliver your products, all the way to same day delivery. Now, there's a lot of opportunities here. FedEx has FedEx same-day delivery. The big carriers have their solutions. And there's also people that just say, hey, there's local networks that you can reach out to that do these things. Look into that. Make sure to differentiate yourself from it. Curbside pickup, you notice how Gertrude Hawk Chocolate did that. Their goal of that was to capture some of that browsing traffic they weren't getting, browse on the website, pick it up in the store. Here's the biggest one, my biggest takeaway here, the delivery date and time selection. You don't have to show a calendar like Donald Russell did. You could just show that delivery date like Amazon does. Tell the customers when their items arrive. That is such a big thing, especially right now. I am a millennial and I am window shopping on everybody's website. And if I see standard shipping, I don't need it. If I see this will be here in 2 days, I kind of need it at that point. So what are some of the best practices to go over? So I've talked about these in a few different slides. Here's a quick summary of what these are. Options. Give the customer options. Gone are the days where we just say standard and expedited like our CEO was trying to fix in 2008. We have 12 years now. We have 12 years of learning. Just listen to a little bit of it. Give them the ability to say, hey, if you want to come by the store and pick it up, do that. Hey, you want to see when it arrives? Do that. But make sure that when we are charging our customers, we're charging the correct price too. So take a look at your numbers. Are we charging the right amount? Do we need to enable dimensional shipping? Are we charging the customer too much for shipping? Are we too in the black and we're okay to take into the red if we get those orders through? All of those things around reviewing your numbers is going to be a fantastic way to do that. But at the end of the day, we don't want to compromise on our accuracy. If a customer is willing and ready to pay for parts of their shipping, make sure they're paying for all of the shipping or the negotiated amount. If some customers say, hey, I take a 10% loss and I operate on that, Awesome. Know your numbers there. Shipping as a marketing tool. So if you rewind back to a few minutes ago, I guess a lot of minutes ago, I talked about our carrier rules section. This gives you the ability to target when and where and why. So if you guys want to run a free shipping promotion to the US 48 for pink t-shirts when they spend over $50, use that as a marketing tool. Drive the sales of that. Make it sexy. Hey, you order these shirts, you get free shipping. You know, gone are the days where we're just sending out an email, put on your website, tweet it. You can do all those kinds of things, and you can set time frames on it. Set a 24-hour free shipping frenzy on a link through Twitter. Try it out. Why not? Biggest thing is set the right expectations. Make sure that when we're telling a customer an item's going to arrive, make sure it arrives there. Make sure that we're charging the correct amount. All of that stuff we talked about before is incredibly important. And especially, and the last thing is invest in the right partnerships. That's not just carriers. That's not just, you know, merchants, landlords, things like that. Look at your network of who you're working with and look at why you're working with them and make sure that you are aligned and you're getting the best value out of them. I know myself as an app provider, we have a lot of really fun conversations right now with customers where we're revamping and revisiting what they're doing. We're going from not just the shipping audit with the carriers, but we're auditing their practices. And it's a great thing that I recommend for everyone to do with all their partners. So with that being said, I'm opening this all up to questions, comments, concerns, feedback. Feel free to ask me now if you don't get a hold of me. Quentin@ShipperHQ.com. Thank you guys so much for having us, and I appreciate the Blazer team for letting us speak.
Big thanks to Quentin and ShipperHQ for all that great information and advice. If you have any questions for Quentin or any of our speakers today, please send them over in the webinar chat or email them to qa@midwestecommerceseminar.com, #MES2020. Our final speaker today is Heather Doris from Square. Heather is here to talk about payments. These days, there are a lot of different ways to handle e-commerce transactions. Customer preferences are evolving right underneath our feet, and Square is in the center of it all. Let's hear from Heather and about the latest strategies for e-commerce payment solutions.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to October 1st. It's not October 1st right now, so hello from the past. Thank you so much for joining us and ShipperHQ. Today, we're really excited that you took the time, that you registered, that you're doing your due diligence by learning a little bit more about what's out there. And we're really excited about Blazer for putting the whole event together. So with that, just a quick introduction. My name is Heather Doris. I work at Square, and I've been here for about 4 years, and I work on our solutions partnerships team. So I actually matchmake, both personally and professionally. I matchmake a lot of my friends, but I also matchmake businesses with the right agencies. So looking to help businesses build custom solutions, whether that's with or without Square, and have a big passion for just agency education and enablement in general. They're so critical to business success. That's the end of my TED Talk. I will go ahead and get started. So, Square, for those of you who are familiar, you have probably seen that little white thing that everyone talks about. Whenever I tell people I work at Square, they're like, is it that little white thing? Or I've seen that at coffee shops, usually rings a bell. So a few facts about us. We were founded 10, almost 11 years ago in St. Louis. So we are a Midwest company at heart. Our co-founder, Jim McKelvey, he owned a glass blowing studio in St. Louis. And like many small business owners, he was just struggling with the idea of credit cards in general. I think the industry as a whole was super confusing to him. And lucky enough for him, he had a friend named Jack Dorsey who had, at the time, just started and was CEO of Twitter. I mean, I wish we all had a friend like Jack Dorsey that we could take our business ideas to, but Jim McKelvey also is a computer scientist and an economist. So I think those two superheroes teamed up to understand what the landscape looked like, what do payments look like, how do we make this easy for everyone. It's all about disruption in the tech industry. And so they took the hardware that was available and really booming at the time, which are these little guys that I'm sure a few of you have. built hardware so that you could start accepting payments from your mobile devices. From there, it just really exploded. So I think everyone thinks of Square as like the small business option. And in the beginning, it absolutely was. It was every dog groomer. It was every farmer's market. It was every coffee shop. And then in the space of 4 years, Square was processing almost $15 billion in payments. So I think it was a moment where the company realized like we should probably be making tools for both small and large businesses, because that same coffee shop that started on Square 4 years ago now has 10 locations, and they have different needs. And it's a part of our mission as a company. It's just all about economic empowerment. So if, you know, payments was the thing we originally wanted to disrupt, it was about what other areas can we disrupt for small businesses? How can we make this easy, whether that's integrating with systems they already have or creating amazing first-party products with the talented folks that we have. So a few other small tidbits. We went public in 2015. Jack rang the bell with his mom. She's also from St. Louis. She still lives there. She stops in the office and she'll eat in the cafeteria sometimes. And yeah, with all that being said, hopefully if you take away something, it's that Square is more than just a little white reader. We have a pretty powerful roadmap. So won't spend too much time here, but you might recognize a few products. I'll highlight Square Capital, which is the lending arm of Square. So if you follow anything in relation to like Square stock, for instance, they talk about Square Capital quite frequently, and that's just giving loans to both small and large businesses. Cash App, I'm just gonna leave it there. If you know what Cash App is, great. That's an amazing banking tool that's just becoming kind of like the golden child of Square. I hear about Cash App every day and the new cool things that they're innovating. Outside of that, Square Payroll, first-party hardware products, the Square Terminal on the far right, I'll touch on a bit later, but you'll see that it's become about creating a completely holistic vision. So some of these are software products, some of this is in relation to APIs, and then other pieces are specifically focusing on hardware. So a quick seminar on managed payments, because I know that I'm probably losing you now. Come back, stay with me. I promise this is important, regardless if you're going to use Square. Okay, do I have you? Cool. So managed payments, if you've ever worked in the payment space, may or may not be a familiar term to you. What does this mean for Square? We have a unique approach in which we are the merchant of record, and we handle basically everything end to end from a payments perspective. So that's end to end encryption, meaning that when you're swiping your card, we're doing it in a very safe and secure way. Everything is tokenized, everything is processed on Square hardware, which is also incredibly important. We are PCI compliant level 1. Every business needs to be PCI compliant. Square has a seat on the board of PCI compliance, so we take that quite seriously, but that also saves businesses so much money and time. Some people have a dedicated job, and if you're on this call, hey, to managing PCI compliance for businesses. We also manage chargeback and disputes. We have our own first-party fraud monitoring software. Just because we have so much information and like a wealth of data inside of Square, we can understand unhealthy or risky patterns from particular buyers or sellers. And we give you, the business, the option to either green light, red light certain payments. Now that we've moved on from our managed payments spiel, omni-channel, a buzzword that I'm sure everyone's heard, but the way that Square interprets it is simply that if you are taking payments, you have a unique value in unifying those payments across your channels. You have a better picture of your customer, you have a better picture of your business, you have better pictures of real-time information. So we want to make that possible in a few different ways. The infographic we have here shows just the ways we can unify it between in-person, which doesn't necessarily mean in store, but could be a pop-up or someone wants to stop by and take a payment in person. Online could be anything virtual, so an invoice, that could be your website, etc. So I know I'm not the first, well, hopefully I'm not the first person you're listening to on this panel, but we are joined by many awesome partners that you may already be familiar with or you might already be using. And in this type of ecosystem, it's so important that your systems talk to each other. I would bet like $10 right now that every presentation will touch on the fact that systems need to speak together. So this isn't a new concept. What is Square doing this or doing about this for you? We've made it as easy as possible to integrate with your ERP and CRM or OMS, but more commonly ERP. So there is a product coming in the future. I probably shouldn't say timeline, but that will make it incredibly easy for you to connect Square payments to your ERP. But honestly, regardless if you're using Square or not, connecting to an ERP like your payments is super important. Doing something manual is just maybe not the best use of time. So I kind of want to cut out, I'm going to start the slide over. We are joined by many wonderful partners that you may already be using or familiar with. Hopefully I'm not the first to point that out, but in this type of ecosystem, it's so important that everything talks to each other. Would bet $100 I'm not the first person to say this. What we're doing at Square to make this easier for you is simply build pathways between your Square payments and your ERP or CRM or OMS, but most commonly ERP. There is a product coming in the future in which we'll make that nearly as easy as a click of a button, so more to come there. But we understand that how this could be really important, especially in the retail and manufacturing space. I love the logo for this business. I'm going to highlight a key win from the past few months that's been really exciting to roll out and was driven through just COVID urgencies and needs. There are several stories, but I like this one in particular because one, it's retail, but two, this was really born out of a company, so Phantom Fireworks, which is based out of the US. They were unable to sell fireworks out of their brick and mortar locations in certain states due to COVID. So their plan, and with 4th of July looming, was to create pop-up tents outside of their stores or their shutdown locations. And they purchased nearly 1,600 Square stands to get up and running very quickly with retail point of sale. So for 4th of July, they saw nearly a 34% revenue lift. And we're hoping to roll out to their Superstore locations in time for New Year's Eve. It's crazy because by the time this comes out, it'll be October 1st, and we'll blink again and it'll be 2021, which I'm sure we're all excited for different reasons. Okay, so that story, if it doesn't resonate with you, I'm sort of alluded to this, there are millions of seller stories at Square. And so culminating all of those and understanding in the last 6 months what's been important from a payments perspective during COVID, there are 3 large factors that really stand out. So the first is contactless payments. And this means being able to take either online payments. So if I'm like sitting at a restaurant and they have QR codes that I'm scanning and I'm ordering straight from my phone, or this means at a place of business where I would normally hand them my credit card that I could otherwise tap my phone, use Apple Pay, or tap my card, because almost all cards are essentially chip enabled or have that contactless NFC. So that's one factor that we've seen come out of this. I would probably stack rank that equally with online as number 1. And then with online, we saw thousands of sellers run to the door to get a website up and running close to March and April. And we were able to power that. We have a platform called Square Online, but we partner with BigCommerce, we partner with several other e-commerce platforms. So really just making sure everyone had a seamless experience and can take payments in a way that wasn't super disruptive to their business, but added to what they already had. Hopefully, most of you are online at this point, but I think figuring out your brand and figuring out that sellers are starting to look very different. Not only are they millennial, but they are Gen Z. And so something that we've been thinking about as a company too is like, how do you capture this like new generation of sellers? Commerce won't look the same. I think everyone's thinking about that. And I'm sure others have touched on their presentations as it relates to e-commerce, different strategies around how to stay most up to date. And for us, it's thinking about selling on social. So selling on Instagram, selling on Facebook. And again, just maybe reinventing a bit of your brand right now while you have the time to be super present in, if depending on where you are, if you are in quarantine. The third is customers. So it's understanding who those customers are, kind of going back to this point of like, are your customers starting to look different? And if they are you capturing that information? And what are you doing with it? And we've seen a lot of sellers come to Square wanting to paint a more holistic picture of who are my new customers? What do they look like and where are they coming from? So we're starting to enable more of that insight, just kind of like off the shelf. And I would say that's a big attraction for small and enterprise sellers, just kind of across the board. So a few platform recommendations or things to consider. This is how we enable them in Square, but if you can kind of enable this technology other ways, that's great as well. So the first is Orders API, which is essentially allowing you to take take orders via web and mobile application and send them directly to Square point of sale. If you just think about it, it's really like if you have all these spokes on a wheel, Orders API is what allows you to connect all of those different spokes. Terminal API, this is in public beta. It's the one I'm the most excited about on here. It's funny, this is like a little cartoon on the top right-hand corner, but it's a brand new piece of hardware, or about a year old. It's super sleek. It's literally like the size of your iPhone if you were to tilt it, and it allows you to tap to dip your chip, swipe, it prints a receipt, it's wireless. And with Terminal API, which has been so long awaited, you are able to connect it to any custom point of sale, almost every like back office software. So another great project to partner with Blazor on if you have your own custom point of sale, but you want a better way to take payments, or you want the payments to speak with that point of sale. This is, I think, the one that a lot of folks internally are excited to see like what people do with it. We've already seen a couple of really great uses in healthcare, but also just field services, interesting food and beverage cases too. Again, good price point, like easy to use and contactless, which is what everyone needs right now. Customers API allows you to access a lot of that seller information I talked about earlier to help you paint that picture of who am I selling to, what do they look like, can I group them, can I message to them, etc. So we are nearing the end of our journey. If you stayed with me, thank you. If you have a drink, like take a drink. I'm gonna have a sip of water quickly. So this is a great place to end. If anything has inspired you, either between Square or some of the other presentations about like innovating or rethinking your tech stack, if you have like a wish list or you have an idea around what could be possible for your business, I do think this is the time to consider or make those considerations, although I completely empathize with the fact that we have to be conservative with like our budgets in some way. So what Square is extending is something called Square Development Credit. It gives you access to up to $20,000 in funds towards your project. And really this can be done in partner with any agency. So Blazer, again, if you're keen on implementing or creating a new commerce experience, we're here to co-sponsor it. It really was born as more of a COVID initiative, but really it's just empowering businesses to build really cool and unique experiences, especially with Square in mind and Square APIs. We think there's a ton more to unlock. So I'm going to wrap it up. Just some of the key takeaways. Square is definitely just more than a little white reader. Hopefully you understand a little bit more about managed payments and why it's important. Security, security, security. Square APIs, there are some new ones that are really exciting, but hopefully they help you envision a new way of doing contactless commerce or unifying all of the channels that you have. And then lastly, think big, whether that's with Square or any other partner. Now's the time to really reinvent or enhance how you're doing things day to day. And I think we're all excited to see what comes out of this. And it's been a really exciting time to be in tech and be in this space and see the creativity come out of it. So with that, if there are any questions, thank you again for listening, taking the time, and being a good advocate for your own business, for even attending. So thank you.
Welcome back, everyone, and a big thanks to Square, ShipperHQ, TaxJar, and Brightpearl. And thank you to all of you in the attendance for joining us today. Please send your questions and other inquiries for all of today's speakers to qa@midwestecommerceseminar.com, or you can hit us up in the webinar chat. While we gather up your questions, let's have a toast to today's panel and everybody watching. As we explained last week, and we've asked each of our partners to provide a signature cocktail recipe that we could share with you to spice up our Q&A sessions. So here we go. Let's take a look at those drinks now. Well, thanks everybody for coming. And you can find those delicious cocktail recipes at midwestecommerceseminar.com/cocktails. And now we're going to go ahead and start our live Q&A session for the questions that I've gotten. I want to go ahead and start with Brightpearl with a couple questions here. We've experienced a failed ERP implementation in the past and are a bit worried about going through that process again. What does Brightpearl's implementation process look like?
That's a tongue twister.
Right.
No, it's a great question. And one that, unfortunately in the ERP world, we hear a lot of horror stories about what these implementations, what happens if they go wrong. And with just the amount of time and resources that are spent on getting started, it's understandable that some folks are just a little bit cautious. But I would definitely say that implementation is one of Brightpearl's core competencies, and really something we've perfected over the years. And I want to call out just a few different things. One, as I mentioned in our last slide of our presentation, Brightpearl does fixed implementation, which means for any sort of customer that's joining the platform, we outline exactly what that cost and that timeline is before you even sign a contract, which is literally unheard of in the ERP industry. And the reason that we do that is because we do all the scoping work up front before you even sign, and make sure that we're able to deliver something that we call a technical solutions proposal, which outlines exactly how we plan to configure Brightpearl to match your business. We also handle all of our implementations in-house with our own team of professional services who have hundreds and hundreds of ERP implementations under their belts, and have the experience to really handle sort of any scenario that comes their way. And then finally, this one is one I like to end on, is Brightpearl deployment typically takes about 80 to 100 days, which is a third of the time that it would take to implement a more traditional ERP. So as you're considering a solution partner through this, just make sure you get familiar with what that process looks like. Ask to talk to customers who've gone through implementation, ask what sort of guarantees you have as a customer throughout that implementation so that you can really have just a more realistic expectation on how this is going to work with your business.
Cool. Another question here. What would you say to a business that's been growing a lot since the pandemic and is considering investing more in acquisition?
Well, first of all, congratulations. Not an easy feat to do right now, but something you should be really proud of, a great accomplishment. But I will say this has actually come up a lot lately as we have more conversations with customers who are similar, who have seen a lot of growth and are really interested in that sort of acquisition side of the house. Obviously, that's important, and you certainly want to take advantage of any sort of increasing demand that you've got. But just to bring it back to some of the stuff that I mentioned in our presentation, even if you've got loads and loads of new customers that are coming your way, if you are failing to create a frictionless buying experience on the back end, you're basically creating this like one and done type of shopping experience, right? So maybe you get that first sale, always exciting, but the type of stats that really relate to the health of your business, like something like customer lifetime value, that will basically be non-existent. So it's the power of that repeat business that's going to carry you through that surge, but also carry you long-term. So in this instance, I would focus heavily on streamlining the back end while that demand is already in existence.
Okay. Last question here. You talked a lot about the impact of negative reviews, but what about the power of positive reviews?
That's a really good point. I'm glad someone called me out on that little negative Nancy going on here. But I've spent a lot of time talking about sort of the negative aspect, but you're right. What happens when a potential consumer sees a lot of positive reviews? So we found in our research that we did with Trustpilot that I think it was 75% of shoppers agreed that they would actually spend more money with a merchant that has excellent reviews. So those reviews are a huge reason why somebody actually decides to purchase. But what's even more interesting is that the difference in revenue between a 3-star average rating and a 5-star average rating is 33%. So let that sink in for a second. I mean, imagine what your business would do with 33% increase in revenue, right? Lots of opportunity. So I would think about it in that light as well. And I'm glad somebody mentioned that. And just for a quick plug too, there are tons and tons of other stats that we have from that report specifically that we highlighted. So if you just Google Brightpearl, Rise of the Review Culture, you'll see all the data that we've got access to, as well as some other sort of expert findings. So definitely check that out as well.
Well, thanks, Sarah, for answering some live questions here. I'm going to go on to Zach over at TaxJar. Zach, does sales tax depend on where the company is based or where the customer is based?
Great question. It depends. So those are specific to sourcing rules. So in some states, if it's a sale to a customer that's within the same state as where the product's shipped, if it's an origin-based sourcing state, it's taxed on where the item is being shipped from. Anytime you're shipping outside of state lines into another state where you're registered to collect tax in, or if you're inside a state where it's a destination-based sourcing rule, then tax is always going to be applied based on where the customer is located or where the product's shipping to.
Cool. Got one more question for you here. With a multi-channel business, do you meet Nexus when the total from all channels meet the Nexus minimum, or is it per channel? And does TaxJar take into account each channel, including the marketplaces that have already been collected?
Another great question. And again, it depends. So it is actually based on total transaction volume across all channels. Some states only require the retail-based sales to count against the Nexus thresholds. And some states say it's gross revenue and gross sales. So it does depend on the state, but TaxJar can help with identifying where that exposure is and can support proper tax across those multiple channels.
Okay, perfect. I got some questions here for ShipperHQ. Where does ShipperHQ fit in the e-commerce ecosystem to drive conversions?
So ShipperHQ is in the cart and checkout. So you're kind of in really the biggest decision making. You're the next thing of saying, okay, do I actually want to get this? So we're all about that experience. We're all about trying to get that customer right across the line.
Okay. And so what does the process look like to set up ShipperHQ, and how often do you need to monitor the back end logic?
So ShipperHQ is a free trial. We have 30 days. It's a true free trial, no credit card, no sort of like freemium, get you in the door. Free 30-day trial usually takes people a couple days to get things set up, depending on your requirements. Not 80 to 100 days. You don't have as much going on as Brightpearl, but it's, you usually get it done in about a week. Get that tested, get that going. ShipperHQ is designed as kind of a set it and forget it tool. Once you get things set up, you kind of leave it alone and let it be. As things change around the holidays, people want to do different things for Black Friday, Cyber Monday. They'll go in there, set some things up, and then they kind of log out of it and forget about us.
Okay, sounds good. That's all I have for ShipperHQ. For Square, I've got 3 questions here. Would Square replace my existing POS system, or would it be an additional solution that integrates into it?
Yeah, that's a great question. It's really dependent. So yes, you can replace and use Square as your point of sale, or there are several other solutions that you can use using our APIs. So you can integrate if you have a custom point of sale using our Reader SDK or Terminal API. If you're really married, or again, you've invested in building something custom. So it's really a twofold answer.
Okay, perfect. What are some examples of a long-term strategy that aren't necessarily born out of the COVID-19 short-term survival?
Great question. And again, it's short-term and long-term out there. We've really been thinking about how we help our sellers both in the short-term and long-term, and some of the long-term strategies that we're thinking about are really helping them identify new seller behaviors. So like, what do consumers look like post the pandemic? This shouldn't come as a surprise to anyone, but our shopping behaviors have totally changed, or they will totally change. So whether you're identifying even yourself, even as a millennial, I just started using Instagram for shopping in the last 6 months, just in bed late at night. It's really bad for my finances, but otherwise, we like to think about it also from the perspective of how will people like to shop. And so we saw interesting trends with grocery stores, not a market that you would ever think of for pickup or custom apps or order ahead. So we're seeing entirely new segments have to adopt new fulfillment channels, and just think about new ways to adapt to their seller base.
Yeah, I have to get into Instagram shopping. Lauren said something about that over at BigCommerce on last week's seminar. So will post-pandemic shipping and payment solutions be different than it is currently? And what can we expect for 2021?
Yeah, I mean, I alluded to this a bit, but I think the fulfillment methods will look increasingly different or just have more variety. So before, when we saw food and beverage and big box retailers kind of stick with like the pick up in store or buy online, it's now like, you know, your brewery around the corner and they're offering like 4 different fulfillment methods to get like your favorite beers. Like, that's a wild and new concept that is exciting as a consumer, but I think it means like adapting really fast as a business. And that also could mean, and people have seen this as well, maybe shifting from like B2B to B2C. So it's really just a good time to be super exploratory, kind of work with someone like Blazer to talk about long-term strategies and not just think about the short-term solutions.
All right, perfect. Well, I'd like to thank Brightpearl, TaxJar, ShipperHQ, and Square today for being on this second week seminar. I wanted to welcome everybody to come back next week where we talk about marketing and analytics behind the marketing. So please tune in next Thursday at 2 p.m. for the 3rd edition of the Midwest E-commerce seminar. And we thank you all again for attending. Have a great day.